Sally's own work obviously makes me a proud dad, and while I'm at it, I guess I have to thank George Solomon again for making her a columnist. He's a damn good one. She and I agree that she's the best writer in the family now. That's supposed to be funny. One of the reasons she's good at it is I went to TCU and she went to Stanford. Best $10 million I ever spent. Well, let me just say right off that I accept this award before somebody demands a recount. And I'm very proud of it. I'll cherish it, along with all the other things that people give me for living too long. You tend to get these things if you stay around the business for 65 years like I have. I'm going to lose my place here 2 or 3 times in these declining years, so bear with me. I'm particularly happy to get this award because so many of my old friends and pals and colleagues have gotten ahead of me. There was about 15 years there were a group of us who used to get together once a year. We called ourselves the Geezers, and it consisted of Jim Murray and Blackie Sherrod, Furman Bisher, Ed Pope, Dave Kendrick, Bill Millsaps, all of whom have won the Red Smith Award. And I was always pretty envious of that. But we would sit around, we'd go to either Atlanta or Dallas or somewhere and rent a suite, sit around for 3 days and tell the same old story, smoke and drink, complain about political correctness, laugh about all the point missers we knew in the business, and try to correct what was wrong with the world. And when I heard that I was getting this award, there were a few of them left. I sent one email that said, 7th Geezer nabs Red Smith Award. I'm, of course, proud that I did know Red Smith pretty well. We sat next to each other in Super Bowls and college games and sampled a lot of hors d'oeuvres and hospitality suites and things like that. And he was one of my heroes, one of my idols, and he's one of the guys I stole from when I was trying to develop my own voice. You need to read everybody, you need to steal from them and take it and use it to the best of your ability if you want to be a sports writer, I think, or any other kind of writer. I was very lucky that the editor I had, the guy who hired me out of high school before I went to college, Blackie Sherrod, Red Smith Award winner, he hired me for the only, I've had 4 jobs in my life, and he hired me for the first 2 at the Fort Worth Press and the Dallas Times-Herald. And I come from an era, by the way, when the columnists wrote 6 times a week. And if you went to a game store, you wrote lead, column, sidebar, and notes. I looked up one day in the business and found out that it took 4 people to do that. I couldn't believe it. And then, of course, that's been corrected. They've cut back to 1 because of financial stress, and it's usually the AP guy. Some of what I'm going to say in the next few minutes appears in a book I've read that'll be out around the first of the year. It's kind of a journalism memoir. My original title was Typing Through the Laughter, which is what my life has been about. And the publisher's going to change it to something else, but I suggested if it hopes to sell, it was going to be, I wanted to call it a serial rapist diet book. Book publishing being what it is today, you may not see it unless you happen to find it outside your door at a Motel 6 in Shreveport or somewhere like that. You're not very good at circulating things, but it'll be out there somewhere. I'll tell some of the stories that are in it right here. I've had, as I said, went to work at the Fort Worth Press, and I learned that the first thing you know about a daily paper is that it has to come out every day. Don't ever forget that. Blackie taught me 2 things right away when I first went to work. He said, you know the difference between AMs and PMs. Of course, there's no such thing anymore, but back then there was. And I said, yeah, the AM paper comes to your flower bed in the morning and the PM paper comes to your flower bed in the afternoon. He said, well, aside from that, he said, when you write for PMs, you got to think about what's next and how and why and that sort of thing. Then he gave me 4, he didn't tell me, by the way, write like you talk. He didn't say always pick an angle. He didn't say recognize the defining moment and kick it to death. And he didn't use the old Scripps Howard battle cry, which was tell it to Aunt Edna. What he said was, send me a paragraph you can go before you put the score in it. That's also supposed to be funny, by the way. The guys that, the best thing Blackie did for me was put me on things to read. All the great humorists, Dorothy Parker, James Thurber, S.J. Trotman, Damon Runyon, and then John Lardner and Red Smith and some of my idols. And I read them all, and I learned a lot from all of them. And as Red himself said, you read the old masters and you take what you can from them, and one day, by accident maybe, you discover your own voice and you go with it from there. But I want to quote some of the stuff that, first I got to go back to one of the great journalism lessons Blackie gave me. My first big event to cover when I went to work for the paper and I was a freshman in college was the Texas Women's Golf Open. And it was Rivercrest in Fort Worth, and APSE Harris and Louise Suggs and Betty Jameson and all the great lady golfers were there. I covered it, and it so happened that it was a match play tournament. It was won by an amateur named Polly Riley, who beat APSE Harris in the final 10-9, the worst loss Babe ever had. She won the tournament 5 times. So I wrote my story the next morning, and my lead said, amateur Polly Riley found the Rivercrest greens as easy to read as Louisa May Alcott. And today she's the Texas Women's Open champion. Well, Blackie looked at it and he said, is this for the Fort Worth Press or the Fort Worth Public Library? Lesson learned. We had all these great people that, by the way, I skipped something which I have to get back to. The highlight of the Fort Worth Press in my days was the editor of the paper decided one day that he wanted to hire a marquee sports columnist, preferably a football player, being from Texas. So we hired a guy named Kyle Aldrich, who you've never heard of, but he was an All-American at TCU. He was an All-Pro with the Washington Redskins. And by the way, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say Redskins. Can we say that now? That's kind of under discussion, isn't it? I got some suggestions if you ever want to change it, George. They could call it the Washington Casinos. They could call it the Washington Politically Correct. Or they could call it the Washington Descendants of Native Americans who got shot by John Wayne. Anyhow, we got this guy called, and Blackie said the only reason the editor hired him was because he wanted to get a famous football name, and Red Grange couldn't speak English, and Duke Rodney was dead, so we hired Kyle. But here's a great lead Kyle wrote on one of his columns one day. I enjoy reading this. The best thing you can ever see is a skillet bubbling over with hot grease and the fish turning brown over an open fire. Man, you can't for the life of you beat a good old fish fry. We all agreed that Kyle was going for the Pulitzer that day. Blackie sent me back into the files, the old big binders, this is before microfilm and all that stuff, to read some of the great old sports writers, and I learned, Lord knows it was like a journalism degree to read some of the guys, stumbled across Westbrook Pecker's great lead when he was a sports writer, which was, John McGraw is dead, so what? Henry McLemore, the old United Press columnist, covering the Berlin Olympics in 1936. The Olympic marathon was run on Tuesday. It's now Thursday, and I'm still waiting for the Americans to finish. Great stuff. And I thought, that's how I want to do it. Of course, the great John Lardner leads, the famous Stanley Kitchell was 24 years old when he was fatally shot in the back by the common law husband of the lady cooking his breakfast. Red Smith called it the greatest novel ever written in one sentence. And then Lardner again, who had a tremendous influence on me, like Red did. It was, John wrote when the Giants won the pennant in Leo DeRocher was the manager when the Giants won the pennant in 1951. And Lardner wrote that Leo DeRocher's license to think was extended for 2 more weeks. But one of my favorites of his was Take Yacht Racing Now. Why does it fascinate the sporting public so much that crowds will stand all night outside a newspaper office in Terre Haute or Des Moines, waiting to hear the results of the regatta for an F-class Butterfly sloop off Throg's Neck, Long Island? For that matter, who was Throg? I was heavily influenced by that stuff. And there was a great boxing scandal in New York City back in the late 40s. And, all the guys were scrambling around trying to get exposés and exposing things like that. And Red handled it best in his column when he wrote, "This was written after Rocky Graziano stirred up a controversy in the fight circles by not mentioning not taking a $100,000 bribe before not throwing a fight that was not held." And Red's lead, unforgettable lead, when he covered the Olympic Games in London in 1948. "And so, as the gas man arrives to take the last shilling out of the meter and turn off the Olympic flame, reluctantly we say farewell to merry England. No use pretending the party isn't a wrench. Many things will be missed. The kippers, the nut brown martinis, and most of all, the bath towel. When you've lived with a bath towel week upon week and become attached to it, you feel that you know the towel and the towel knows you." Great stuff. That leader, Reg, forced me one day not too long ago, to write a story for the Golf Digest, my current employer, but they had me rethink it. I said, after 32 years, I finally found a bar of soap in my British Open hotel room. We at the Fort Worth Press thought we had the best sports staff that was possible among people who didn't read newspapers and buy them, who wrote for each other. There was Blackie Sherrod, Bud Schroet, and Gary Cartwright, myself, and 1 or 2 others. And I'll just give you some examples of what we strove to do. Blackie covered the Marciano-Walcott fight, 1952, and one of his phrases was, "Walcott went slowly to the floor, head down like a Hindu on a prayer rug. And then his head touched, and there he remained, like an upended slice of cantaloupe." The NFL, you may not know this, the NFL first had a pro team in Dallas in 1952. Texas wasn't ready for pro football then. They didn't even last a year. They didn't win a game. Nobody went to the Cotton Bowl, which held 75,000. At the most, they'd have 15,000 people in it. And Bud Schroet was assigned to cover them. One day he wrote, his lead was, "Here's a suggestion for Coach Jimmy Phelan. Instead of having the Texans ceremonially introduced before every game, why not let them go up in the stands and shake hands personally with their 27 fans?" Then pro football did come to Dallas, and we had Gary Cartwright covering the Cowboys. And of course, he wrote an immortal lead. One day he covered the Cowboys. Don Meredith threw an interception on the goal line in the last minute to lose the game to Cleveland. And Jeff was up to the task the next day, and he wrote, "The four horsemen rode again Sunday in the Cotton Bowl. You know them: pestilence, famine, death, and Meredith." I was obviously channeling John Lardner the day I wrote from Austin, Texas, "Take the Southwest Conference track meet, please. All we really know is that the only thing worse than track is field." somewhere along the way, by the way, I've told Precious' daughter to throw a net over me if I go on too long. Somewhere along the way, sports writing got contaminated by what's called the new journalism. All I know about new journalism is that there used to be, before that, there was good journalism, and good journalism still kicks new journalism's butt around the block. But anyhow, it comes in three forms, as far as I can tell. It's either the New York writer who finds racism in every metaphor west of the Hudson River. That's one example. Another example is the political writer who turns to sports writing to inform us that a Mickey Mantle strikeout against the Boston Red Sox on July the 18th in 1958 changed the course of Western civilization. And the other one is the political writer who turns to sports to conclude that all athletes in Florida have psychological problems because their state is shaped like a penis. All that stuff chasing me back today to what I consider to be some devilishly good sports writing that goes on today all around the country. A lot of it on the internet, some of it still in newspapers, thank God. But I have to, see, I don't want to embarrass her, but I have to quote a lead that my daughter wrote in the Post some time back. It was one of my favorites. It went like this. According to NCAA bylaws, I have violated the rules of amateurism. I am therefore ineligible to continue writing this column. Fortunately, however, I've just been fully reinstated. An exhaustive NCAA inquiry of several seconds has found that while rules were deeply violated, none was broken. Hence, my eligibility has resulted in the following punishment. I am eligible again, but I wish to make clear that these actions are unacceptable. There's no place for them in intercollegiate athletics except at Auburn. I really do appreciate this award, this thing you're going to give me, and if I were younger and single, I'd take it on a car date tonight, but I'm going to be in the prominent spot, and I'll leave you with the three best writing tips I ever got from different places. It was Dorothy Parker who said, wit has truth in it. Jokes are just calisthenics of words. It was Elmore Leonard from right here who said, if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. And it was an old friend of mine in New York, hanging around a guy around PJ Clark's named Fred Finkelhoff, who wrote Broadway hits, Hollywood hits, made a lot of money and retired to the role of a horse player and a guy who sat around a lot. And I was in a lull in the middle of a book one time, and I said to Freddie, we were sitting around drinking a bunch of us at Clark's, and I said, I'm in a lull here. I said, give me a tip, what do you do? He said, there's only one rule for plays or movies or books or almost anything. I said, what's that? He said, get them up a tree, throw rocks at them, get them down again. That's what I've been doing my whole life. I thank y'all for messing around with me.
It's my distinct honor to present the Red Smith Award to Dan Jenkins.